mountains were silent that night, blanketed in fog thick enough to swallow the stars. The air smelled of rain and pine, heavy and cold. At the edge of the forest, half hidden behind twisted cedar trees, stood the old shrine, a crumbling structure of wood and stone that had survived generations of storms and prayers. People in the nearby village called it the Whispering Shrine. They said it was cursed. They said it listened when no one else would, and sometimes it wrote back. Those who dared to climb the mountain claimed that the shrine left messages on its altar, names written on pieces of yellowed paper. Some said the names belonged to the dead. Others whispered they were names of those about to die. Either way, the villagers stopped visiting long ago. Only those desperate for closure or foolish enough to challenge fate ever came here now, on this rain-soaked evening. Ren Ito was one of them. He climbed the narrow path with a flashlight in hand, its beam flickering weakly against the dark. The mud clung to his shoes. Thunder rolled in the distance. He wasn't sure why he was there, only that something had drawn him to the mountain. Something quiet, insistent, almost familiar. By the time he reached the shrine, his clothes were soaked through. He stood beneath its rotting eaves, staring at the weathered door. The faint sound of dripping water echoed from inside. Lightning flashed across the sky, and for a moment Ren thought he saw a shadow move behind the altar. He stepped forward, breath shallow, heart hammering in his chest. The smell of incense lingered, old, almost forgotten. On the altar lay a small slip of paper, pale against the dark wood. Ren hesitated, his fingers trembling as he reached for it. The paper was damp, but still legible. Thin black ink bled slightly across its surface, the letters shaky and uneven, as if written by a trembling hand. It read, Ren Ito, his name. The sound of thunder cracked like an explosion above the shrine. The paper fluttered from his hand, carried by a gust of wind that smelled faintly of smoke and rain. Ren stood frozen, his heart sinking into something deeper than fear. For the first time in years, he felt a strange, cold whisper crawl up his spine, as if the mountain itself had just spoken his name. Ren Ito sat in his small rented room, staring at the photograph he had taken years ago, a black-and-white picture of his childhood home before he left. The image was crisp, professional, yet somehow lifeless, just like the way he felt now. It had been 10 years since he last set foot in his hometown. He had only come back for one reason, to light incense at his mother's grave. But after finding his name written at the shrine last night, he couldn't think of anything else. He tried to laugh it off earlier that morning. Maybe it was a coincidence. Maybe someone from the village remembered him and decided to play a cruel joke. But deep down, the thought didn't sit right. The ink had looked too uneven, too old, like it hadn't been written by a living hand. Ren rubbed his temples, trying to shake the thought. He had no time for ghost stories. Not now. When he looked out the window, the mist still hung low over the village. The mountains loomed like dark, sleeping giants. He could see the faint outline of the shrine's path cutting through the forest. It felt as though it was watching him, waiting. His childhood home sat just beyond those trees. He hadn't visited it yet. The memories it held were heavier than the mist. Memories of his sister, Aki. Aki had been 16 when she died. The accident still haunted him. Every sound, every image burned into his mind. The fight they had that day, the river's current, the empty silence that followed. After the funeral, his father blamed him. Ren had believed it too, so he left. Now, sitting in that quiet room, surrounded by the scent of damp wood and rain, Ren realized how easily the past still owned him. Even after a decade, he could still hear her voice sometimes, soft, teasing, alive. That night, unable to sleep, he wandered through the village streets. The shops were closed, the air thick with the smell of rain-soaked soil. He passed the old school, the convenience store where Aki used to buy her favorite candy. the bridge over the river. Each place felt like a memory frozen in time. When he reached the small family graveyard at the edge of town, he stood before his mother's stone and bowed his head. "Sorry it took me so long," he whispered under his breath. The words trembled. "I didn't mean to stay away." A gust of wind brushed against his coat, carrying the faint sound of chimes from the mountain. The same sound he'd heard at the shrine. Wren looked up toward the slope. Even from here, he could see the faint glow of lanterns near the shrine's entrance, like dim eyes in the mist. Aki had loved that place. She used to say it was where lost souls whisper their goodbyes. He remembered teasing her for believing such things. Now, he wasn't so sure who had been the fool. Later that night, Wren finally fell asleep, if only for a while. His dreams were sharp and strange. He stood inside the shrine again, the floor creaking beneath his feet. The air shimmered with pale light. A figure stood near the altar, hair falling over her face, white dress brushing the ground. It was Aki. She didn't move, didn't speak, but her lips shaped his name again and again, a soft, endless whisper that filled the silence. "Wren, Wren!" He reached out, but his hand passed through her like smoke. The world around him darkened. The only thing that remained was the sound of a pen scratching across paper. Slow, steady, deliberate. Wren woke with a gasp, drenched in cold sweat. The room was silent except for the faint drip of water outside. His heart pounded, his throat dry. Then he heard it, very faint, coming from somewhere near his desk. A soft scratching sound. He froze. It came again, long, careful strokes, like someone writing. Wren turned on the light. The sound stopped. His desk was empty, only his camera and notebook lying there. He slowly walked over, staring down at the open page. In the corner of the notebook, the ink was still wet. 3 words had been written in his handwriting, though he couldn't remember writing them. It wasn't over. Wren stepped back, his pulse racing. He looked toward the window. The mist outside had thickened, pressing against the glass like a living thing. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled again, and in that deep, echoing sound, Wren could have sworn he heard her voice, calling his name once more. The morning after the dream, the sky was pale gray, and the mountains were wrapped in mist once again. The village felt quiet, too quiet. Even the crows that usually perched along the power lines seemed to have vanished. Wren hadn't slept much. The memory of the words in his notebook, "It wasn't over," still clung to his mind like a shadow that refused to fade. He tried to convince himself it was exhaustion or stress, but deep down, he knew something had changed. He felt watched. By mid-morning, he found himself walking the path back to the mountain. He didn't plan to go, at least that's what he told himself, but his feet carried him there anyway. The damp earth squelched beneath his shoes. The sound of wind through the cedars whispered like faint voices calling from far away. When he reached the shrine, it looked different somehow. The air around it felt heavier, colder, as if time itself slowed near its walls. He stepped inside cautiously. The faint scent of old incense lingered, mixed with the metallic smell of wet stone. The altar stood just as he'd left it, yet the slip of paper with his name was gone. For a moment, relief washed through him. Maybe the wind had carried it away, or maybe some villager had taken it. But when his eyes adjusted to the dim light, he saw another slip lying on the altar, folded neatly. Wren hesitated before picking it up. His hand shook slightly as he turned it over. The name written on it was not his, Haruto Takeda. Wren frowned. The name sounded familiar. Haruto had been one of his classmates long ago, a friendly boy who worked at his father's carpentry shop. A chill crept up Wren's spine. He placed the paper back on the altar, careful not to disturb anything else. His pulse thudded in his ears. Something about this wasn't random. When he returned to the village, he stopped by a small diner for coffee, trying to quiet the storm in his head. A group of locals sat near the counter, whispering urgently. Their words drifted to his ears in broken pieces. Haruto Takeda. Accident this morning. Car lost control. Dead on the spot. Ren froze, his cup trembling in his hand. His mouth went dry. Dead? The paper. The name. The timing. He didn't want to believe it, but the truth clawed its way into his chest. The paper predicted death. If that was true, what did it mean that his own name had appeared first? By late afternoon, he couldn't take it anymore. He went back to the shrine one more time, hoping to find an explanation, or at least prove he wasn't losing his mind. This time, he wasn't alone. A woman stood by the altar, dressed in a layered gray robe. Her hair was silver and long, her back slightly bent. Her eyes, though old, held a sharp, knowing light. She didn't seem surprised to see him. "You've seen your name," she said softly, her voice carrying through the quiet. Ren blinked. How did you—" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she turned toward the altar and lit a small stick of incense. The smoke curled upward in thin, trembling lines. "I am Madame Kaio, keeper of this shrine," she said. "Few come here now. The mountain remembers too many sorrows." Ren stepped closer, unsure if he should speak. "The papers. They appear on their own?" She nodded slowly. "The shrine listens. It writes what the living refuse to speak." "What does that mean?" he asked, his voice low. Madame Kaio met his eyes. "The shrine only writes the names of those who cannot forgive, or those who cannot be forgiven, the ones whose hearts are chained by regret." Ren felt a weight sink deeper in his chest. His thoughts went instantly to Aki, to the river, the fight, and the silence that followed. Madame Kaio's gaze softened. "You should leave, young man, before the mountain's sorrow takes you too. Once a name is written, it cannot be erased until the truth is faced." Her words hit him like cold water. "And if I don't?" she sighed, turning back to the altar. "Then your name will not be the last one written." Ren stood there, unsure what to say. The sound of wind brushed against the shrine's walls, carrying the faintest whisper through the cracks. His name again, soft, pleading. He stepped back, heart pounding. The paper with Haruto's name was gone now, replaced by a blank one. Ren stared at it, feeling the weight of the mountain pressing down on him. The truth was simple, terrifying, and impossible to ignore. The shrine had written his name for a reason, and it wasn't finished with him yet. The next few days felt like a blur. The village looked the same as when Ren had left. Quiet streets, familiar houses, but nothing felt right. Every sound, every shadow seemed to whisper his name. He couldn't forget what Madame Kaio had said. The shrine only writes the names of those who cannot forgive, or be forgiven. Those words echoed in his mind like a curse. At night, Ren dreamed of Aki again. She stood by the riverbank, her hair swaying in the wind. Her eyes were soft but full of sorrow. She never spoke, but her expression said everything. Pain, regret, something unfinished. When he tried to reach her, the water rose between them, swallowing her reflection. Each time he woke, he felt the same tightness in his chest, like someone was sitting on it. He'd tell himself it was only a dream, yet the scent of river water always lingered faintly in his room afterward. One morning, while sorting through an old box of belongings in his mother's house, Ren found a faded photograph wedged between two books. The picture showed Aki, smiling brightly in front of the whispering shrine. She held a small slip of paper in her hand, waving it playfully at the camera. Ren felt his throat tighten. On the back of the photo, written in Aki's handwriting, were the words, "To forgive is to set them free." He sank to the floor, staring at the picture. He remembered that day. She had begged him to visit the shrine with her, saying it was a place where lost souls whisper their secrets. He'd refused, too busy chasing his dream of becoming a photographer. He'd laughed at her superstitions. Now she was the one gone, and he was the one haunted. That afternoon, as Wren walked through the old house, he noticed something strange. Several slips of paper were scattered near the window, as if blown in by the wind. Each one looked aged. The ink faded, but none were blank. They all had names. Some were familiar. Villagers he had known growing up, others strangers. And on the last one, at the bottom of the pile, was his sister's name, Aki Ito. The moment he saw it, the room grew colder. The lights flickered. He could hear faint scratching again, like a pen dragging slowly across paper. But this time, it came from behind him. Wren turned. No one was there. The sound stopped. Then, through the reflection in the old mirror by the hallway, he saw her. Aki stood behind him, pale, quiet, her reflection clearer than his own. Her eyes met his through the glass. For a heartbeat, neither of them moved. Wren spun around. The space was empty. His breath trembled as he pressed a hand to his chest. The world seemed to tilt slightly. The only thing left behind was a single damp footprint leading toward the door. By evening, he found himself standing before the shrine again. He didn't remember deciding to come. It was as if his body had moved on its own. The mist was thicker than usual. It clung to the trees like breath on glass. The shrine's lanterns flickered weakly. The air smelled faintly of incense and rain. He knelt before the altar, his voice unsteady. "Aki, is that you? Is this what you want from me?" There was no answer, only the soft flutter of paper. When he looked up, another slip had appeared. It was blank at first, but as he stared, the ink began to bleed into the page, forming words one letter at a time. "Write the truth." Wren's eyes widened. The message burned into his mind like fire. He stumbled back, heart pounding. The truth? What truth? Memories flashed through him. His fight with Aki the day she died, the harsh words he'd thrown at her, the moment she ran out into the rain. He'd followed too late. The police had called it an accident. But maybe he hadn't known everything. The image of her face, half smiling in that old photograph, returned to him. To forgive is to set them free. Maybe that was what she meant. Maybe she couldn't move on because of him, because he never faced what really happened. Wren returned to the village the next morning, desperate to find answers. He spoke to a few old neighbors, but most avoided his eyes. They all knew something, but no one wanted to say it. Late that night, as he packed his camera bag, he noticed something else. His photos, the ones he'd taken since coming home, looked strange. In several of them, faint shapes appeared near the edges. A shadow by the river, a face near the shrine, and in one image, the clearest of all, stood Aki, gazing at him from behind the altar. Wren's hands shook as he held the picture. There was no denying it anymore. She was reaching out to him, through dreams, through the paper, through the lens of his own camera. She wasn't trying to hurt him. She was trying to tell him something. And if he didn't listen soon, he feared the mountain would make him understand in its own terrible way. The morning sun barely touched the village. A heavy mist clung to the roofs, and the trees swayed with a restless whisper. Wren hadn't slept. His eyes were red, his thoughts spinning in circles. Every image of Aki felt sharper now, every memory more alive. He couldn't ignore it any longer. The shrine wanted him to remember something he had buried too deep for too long. That day, he began searching for answers. He started at the small police outpost near the village square. The officer on duty was older now, gray hair, tired eyes, but Wren recognized him immediately. Officer Suda had been the one who came to their house the night Aki died. Suda looked surprised to see him. "Ren Ito, it's been a long time." Ren nodded quietly. "I need to know about my sister's case. The river accident. Do you still have the report?" Suda sighed. "That was a long time ago. Everyone agreed it was an accident." "I didn't ask what everyone agreed on," Ren said softly. "I asked what really happened." The officer hesitated, then pulled open a drawer and took out a faded folder. "I shouldn't be showing you this," he murmured, sliding it across the desk. Ren opened it. Inside were yellowed pages and old photographs of the river. One picture caught his breath. A single shoe lying on the muddy bank. Aki's. Another showed the broken wooden bridge nearby, a place they used to play when they were kids. But what drew his attention most was the camera listed among her recovered belongings. His camera. He had lost it that same day, during their argument by the river. Aki must have gone back for it. "She went in after it," Ren whispered. "That's why she was there." Suda nodded slowly. "We think so. The current was too strong. Your father didn't want the details public. He blamed you enough already." Ren's chest tightened. For years, he'd believed Aki died because she ran away after their fight. He never knew she'd gone back to help him, to save something that mattered to him. He thanked Suda quietly and left, the truth burning in his chest. Next, he visited Mina, Aki's best friend from high school. She lived above a small flower shop, her hair streaked with gray, but her eyes still kind. When she saw Ren at her door, her face softened with sympathy. "You're back," she said gently. "I wondered when you'd come." Ren nodded. "I need to understand what really happened." Mina led him inside and poured tea. Her hands trembled slightly as she set the cups down. "Aki talked about you all the time, you know," she said. "Even after your fights, she worried about you more than herself." Ren looked down. She shouldn't have. Mina hesitated. "The day before she died, she told me she was going to the shrine. She said she wanted to pray for your safety before you left for Tokyo. She said the shrine wrote names that needed forgiveness." Ren's pulse quickened. "You mean the Whispering Shrine?" "Yes." Mina's eyes dimmed. She believed it could help people find peace, but the next day she never came home. Ren felt like the ground had vanished beneath him. He thanked Mina, though his voice barely worked, and stepped outside. The fog had thickened again, pressing against his skin like a living thing. The truth was becoming clearer now. Aki had gone to the shrine for him, to forgive him, to protect him. And somehow, her spirit was still waiting for him to finish what she had begun. That night, Ren sat in his mother's old room. The air was still, filled with the faint scent of incense. He looked at an old family photograph. His father, Taro, standing tall and stern beside them. Aki smiling in the middle, and himself barely managing a grin. His father had been a hard man, proud and unbending. After Aki's death, he'd closed off completely. His grief had turned to anger, and all that anger had turned toward Ren. Maybe that was why Ren left, to escape the silence and the blame. But now, after everything he had learned, he realized they had both been prisoners of the same pain. He needed to face him. The next morning, Ren walked the familiar dirt road to his father's house. The once proud home looked old and tired, the garden overgrown. The front door creaked as he opened it. Inside, Taro Ito sat by the window, his back hunched, his once dark hair nearly white. When he looked up, his eyes were sharp but weary. "I heard you were back," his father said, his voice low. "You should have stayed away." Ren's throat tightened. "I went to the shrine. That got his attention." "You what?" "The papers are still there. They write names, mine, others. Madame Ko told me they appear for those who can't forgive or be forgiven." Taro's expression darkened. "Nonsense. That place is cursed." Ren took a step forward. "Maybe, but I think Aki went there before she died. She wasn't running away. She was trying to forgive me, to help me." His father's eyes wavered for the first time. He turned away, staring at the floor. "You don't know what you're talking about." Ren reached into his bag and pulled out the old photograph of Aki at the shrine. She believed in it. She left this behind. Taro's face tightened as he looked at the picture. His voice cracked when he spoke. "She told me that day she wanted to make things right. I told her to stop wasting time on foolish wishes." He clenched his fists. She left crying. That was the last time I saw her. Silence filled the room, heavy as stone. Ren's chest ached. For years they had both blamed themselves and each other for something neither truly understood. Now, the truth stood between them like a fragile bridge. He spoke softly, almost a whisper. "Dad, she wants us to finish what she started." Taro didn't answer, but his eyes glistened. That night, as Ren lay awake, the dream came again. Aki stood in the shrine, but this time she looked peaceful. Tears shimmered in her eyes, and when she spoke, her voice was gentle, like the wind through leaves. "Bring him to me," she said. "Only then can we all be free." When Ren woke, the mist outside had begun to clear. For the first time in years, he knew what he had to do. The following morning dawned gray and silent. The fog had thinned, but a light drizzle hung in the air, turning the mountain path slick and dark. Ren stood outside his father's house, camera slung across his shoulder. The photograph of Aki clutched in his hand. Taro stood in the doorway, leaning on his cane. His face looked carved from stone. "You really believe she's there?" he asked quietly. Ren nodded. "I don't just believe it. I've seen her." For a long moment his father said nothing. Then, with a slow, weary sigh, he took his coat from the hook and stepped forward. "Then let's finish this." They walked the path in silence. The forest pressed close around them, the air heavy with the scent of wet cedar and earth. The closer they got, the colder it became, as if the mountain were holding its breath. When they reached the shrine, the mist parted slightly, just enough to reveal the old wooden gate. Its paper charms fluttered weakly in the wind. Ren stopped in front of the altar. "This is it," he said. Taro's eyes scanned the place. "It hasn't changed." His voice cracked. "She used to come here as a child. Said she liked how quiet it was." Ren stepped closer, lighting a stick of incense from the small lantern. The smoke curled upward in soft, trembling lines. "She came here before she died," he said. "To pray for us, to forgive us both." Taro looked at him sharply. "Us?" Ren nodded. "You drove her away with anger. I drove her away with pride. Neither of us listened." The older man's expression flickered. Grief, guilt, something long buried surfacing at last. He looked down at his hands. "I told her to stop wasting her life trying to fix ours. I didn't know those would be my last words to her." The words hung in the air like rain waiting to fall. Then the wind shifted. The air grew colder, and the forest went utterly still. Even the rain seemed to hold its breath. From the altar, a faint shimmer appeared, like light bending through fog. Slowly, the outline of a figure began to form. Ren's heart clenched. Aki stood there. She looked exactly as she had in his dreams, pale, beautiful, her long hair damp and dark, her eyes soft but sad. The slip of paper in her hand glowed faintly in the dim light. Taro stumbled back, his cane scraping against the stone. "Aki?" His voice trembled, the first time Ren had ever heard fear or love break through his father's tone. Aki didn't speak. She only looked at them, her gaze heavy with sorrow. Then, slowly, she lifted the slip of paper. Ren could see it now. 2 names written in dark ink. Ren Ito. Taro Ito. His breath caught. "She's written both of us," he whispered. Taro sank to his knees. His face was wet with rain or tears. "My daughter," What have I done? Aki's lips parted slightly. Her voice was barely a whisper, carried by the wind itself. It wasn't your fault. The sound of her words rippled through the air like a gentle wave. Ren felt his knees weaken. He stepped forward, his voice shaking. Aki, I'm sorry for not believing in you, for leaving, for not saying goodbye. Her eyes softened. She reached out a hand toward him, her fingers trembling in the air. You were meant to live, Ren. I only wanted you to remember me without pain. Then she turned to her father. And you, father. Let go. Please. Taro bowed his head, shoulders shaking. I blamed him because I couldn't face myself. I thought if I punished him, I could forget what I'd said to you, but it only made me smaller. His voice cracked. I'm so sorry, Aki. Aki smiled faintly, her eyes shining with warmth. Then the mountain will forgive you both. The incense flame flickered, and the paper in her hand began to burn, not with fire, but with light. The ink dissolved into the air, leaving only ash that scattered into the mist. Ren reached forward instinctively. Aki, wait. But she only smiled. Soft, peaceful. You found the truth, Ren. That's enough. Her form grew fainter, dissolving into threads of white mist. For a moment, the world fell utterly silent. No wind, no rain, only the faint echo of her voice. Thank you for finding me. And then she was gone. Ren fell to his knees, the weight of years of guilt breaking loose all at once. His father knelt beside him, hand trembling as it rested on his shoulder. The mountain breathed again. The wind rose gently through the cedars, the fog lifting just enough to let sunlight touch the shrine for the first time in years. Ren stared at the altar. 2 blank slips of paper rested there now, clean, untouched. The shrine had released them. They left the mountain as the rain finally stopped. The air was warm again, almost sweet. At the edge of the forest, Taro paused. She's at peace now, he said quietly. Ren nodded. And maybe, so are we. They walked home together for the first time in more than a decade. The road felt shorter now, lighter somehow, as if the mountain had exhaled the weight of their sorrow. As they reached the village, Ren turned back once more. The shrine stood barely visible through the mist, its paper charms fluttering gently in the wind. For the first time, the sound they made didn't feel like whispers of grief, but like a farewell. Morning sunlight spilled softly over the valley, chasing away the last trace of fog. The mountain looked different now, gentler somehow, no longer cloaked in gloom, but wrapped in a quiet peace. Ren stood halfway up the trail, camera hanging loosely from his neck. It had been several weeks since the night at the shrine. Since Aki's light faded into the mist, he hadn't returned. Until now, he had spent the days after with his father, helping repair the old family home. The silence between them had changed, no longer heavy with blame, but filled with small, healing words. They spoke of Aki often. They laughed sometimes even. The laughter still hurt, but it also made breathing easier. Now, standing before the whispering shrine once more, Ren felt something lift inside him. The air was warmer. The mist was thinner. Wildflowers had begun to bloom along the edges of the stone path, tiny white and yellow petals swaying in the breeze. He climbed the steps slowly, each footstep echoing like a heartbeat. The shrine looked the same. Old, worn, but no longer haunted. The air didn't feel heavy or cold. Instead, it hummed faintly with life, as though something sacred still lingered there. Ren set down his camera bag and placed a small wooden frame on the altar. Inside was a photograph of Aki, taken when she was 16, her smile bright, her eyes full of light. The same picture he'd found weeks earlier. Next to it, he placed a small offering of incense and a handful of white lilies, her favorite flowers. "I finally developed the last roll of film," he said quietly, voice barely above the wind. "The one from the day you went to the river." He smiled faintly. "You took more pictures than I thought. You captured the sky, the water, and me, even when I didn't want to be seen. You always saw me, didn't you?" The wind answered with a soft whisper through the trees. Ren exhaled deeply, the weight in his chest easing at last. He lifted his camera and took one more photograph of the shrine bathed in morning light. For the first time, he didn't feel like he was capturing sadness, but peace. He stepped back, glancing once more at the altar. His eyes froze. The wooden surface, where countless slips of paper had once rested, was empty, except for a single faint mark. He leaned closer. There, burned faintly into the wood, were traces of handwriting. Not dark ink this time, but soft, silvery lines that shimmered as the light touched them. The words were simple. "Thank you for forgiving me." Ren's throat tightened. He reached out a trembling hand, fingers brushing the faint glow. "No," he whispered, smiling through tears. "Thank you, Aki." As he spoke, a gentle breeze stirred the air. The lilies swayed, and the scent of flowers filled the clearing. For a moment, Ren swore he saw her, just a flash, standing beneath the Torii gate, her figure translucent in the sunlight, smiling before fading into the wind. He didn't chase it this time. He didn't need to. Turning toward the valley below, he felt warmth on his face. The clouds had parted, revealing a sky streaked with gold and pale blue. The rain had washed everything clean. He began walking down the path, the camera at his side. Each step felt lighter, as though the mountain no longer carried the echoes of sorrow, only whispers of gratitude. When he reached the final bend, he turned for one last look. The shrine stood quiet, half hidden by the morning mist. But as the light shifted, he noticed something. The old wooden sign that read, "The Whispering Shrine," seemed brighter. Its letters no longer etched in shadow but gleaming faintly, like they were written anew. And on the altar, where Aki's picture rested, there was one last slip of paper. Ren hesitated, then smiled. He didn't need to read it. Some names didn't need to be written anymore. He took a deep breath, the mountain air filling his lungs. For the first time in years, it didn't hurt to breathe. As he started down the trail, sunlight poured through the trees, wrapping him in gold. He lifted his camera and took one last picture of the light breaking through the mist, of the mountain reborn, of the place where forgiveness had finally found its name. And when the shutter clicked, it sounded less like a photograph being taken, and more like a heart finally letting go.